The Return, Chapter 2. Refuge. What will it cost me? Saameron kept his gaze lowered. They both looked at the sleeping Xonak. This was not what he'd had in mind for this weekend. There was a new phone number in his pocket that he had been hoping to call. A blonde police officer who looked like she would have been fun to spend an evening with. Artem held still for a moment, shrugged. Just one night for both. Saam hesitated. Artem, a half-breed, thought and behaved like his Nadiv mother most of the time, but was built more like his Karagath father, and had some of his appetites. Or so he thought. He couldn't know for sure, since his mother had brutally dispatched his male parent moments after Artem had been most unwillingly fathered. Saam closed his eyes slowly, languidly. "Okay, but if you hurt me..." He left the sentence unfinished. Artem permitted himself the ghost of a smile at the idea of the Kerep retaliating, trying to harm him. Then he recalled the gutting knife that Saam habitually wore, and the smile faded a little. "Him first, or you?" Saam looked up at him, allowing his head to fall back far enough to make eye contact. "Me first." Matter of fact, like he was about to have a haircut. This had better be worth it. He was limping very slightly when he came in the early hours to check on the Xonak. The staff in the specialized medical center let him come and go at will with no fuss, and had seen this played out perhaps a dozen times over the years. Saam had his own small bedroom and a shower reserved for his use, but he often slept in the IC suite with the latest damaged newcomer, keeping watch. The Xonak's IV line, designed to help him detox, was still in place, and he seemed to be sleeping peacefully. The dark shadows around his eyes were a mixture of rain clouds, wine, and violets. Someone, some sadistic bastard, had really indulged himself. It was possible that the head trauma, as well as the drugs, were contributing to his difficulty in communication, even in High Hanath. Saam hadn't even succeeded in learning his name yet. He sat in the armchair and watched him sleep. He spoke softly in Russian, enjoying the feel of the new language in his mouth. "Sleep well, my friend." His face lit up in pleasure as, unbidden, one of the young nurses brought him coffee, beaming shyly down at him. He looked right into her eyes. "Thank you, Jen." And fully aware of the effect it would have, he rewarded her with a slow smile, which clearly made her day. She was pretty and blonde and sweet, but somehow he just wasn't in the mood. He wanted to let the fragile Xonak recover for a day or two before Artem gave him English, though the interaction wouldn't be any more intrusive than hand-holding, ideally while he slept. That was the agreement. He needed to spend some time with him to get an idea of who he was when his senses were clear. This kind of abuse was enough to turn a Xonak into a cold-blooded killer. He'd seen any number of those on The Vengeance. Or a permanent cowering introvert, frightened of his own shadow. And he had, at best, a few days before his attention would be pulled elsewhere. He dozed in the chair a while, once he managed to make himself comfortable. He woke to find the Xonak watching him. He gave a smile when Saam opened his eyes and seemed fully present for the first time. He was delighted when the Kerep spoke to him in Russian, introduced himself, and asked his name. Tash. He called himself Tash. Saam suspected that was a Russian take on his original name. He'd been living in Russia for several months with a young Hanath owner, but had been sold. There was, of course, a lot more to that tale, but Tash wasn't ready to talk about it. He just quietly ignored any more questions about his real owner. He told Saam a little more about the humans they'd found with him, but soon got very tired and started to doze again. Saam quietly excused himself for a few minutes. He had promised the police that Tash would be back in 3 days. They were going to miss that appointment. He called Vic, explained that the Xonac wasn't ready yet. Yes, physically he was much improved. He just needed food and rest, time for the worst of the beatings, the bruising, to subside. But not ready to learn English, not just yet. He shared Tash's name, waiting patiently when Vic asked for a surname, allowed her to realize that was a stupid question. Do racehorses have surnames? He had once asked a rather pushy interviewer, but it hadn't helped. Tash, he told Vic, knew his human owner's name and the names of 1 or 2 of the other men, but almost nothing else. It was highly unlikely that he knew anything that would help them. Vic was pissed, and let it show. Saam let her grumble and snipe at him, then said, "What happened to the other detective? Is he all right?" It was easier to bargain for a couple more days after she thanked him for saving Novak's life. When he got back, Tash was sitting up, sleepily eating soup. "You speak Russian?" Yeah. Listen, there's a quick way to get a language." Tash's face went grey. "A Nadiv!" Saam's mouth tugged in a slight, tired smile, and he shrugged. "It's quick." "You did that to talk to me?" He was horrified. Well, he swallowed, surprised himself. Why was it suddenly difficult to discuss this? "His name is Artem. I've known him for a long time. I wouldn't call him a friend exactly. He's willing to give you English." No, it's okay." Tash was shaking his head and backing away, the bowl of soup splashing as he dropped it on the hospital table. "He would hold your hand while you sleep, if you agree, that is. Nothing more than that." Can that be right? There is always a price to pay." Saam nodded. "The price is already paid," he said simply. Tash's eyes flooded. He was appalled. "I know it's a lot to ask, especially if you haven't done it before." He probably shouldn't have said that. Tash's horrified face said clearly, "You've done it more than once?" "Listen, we won't even think of doing it until you are ready." "What if I am never ready?" "Then we never do it." A tear edged its way from one of those ridiculously beautiful, bruised and battered eyes. Saam smiled at him. "I'll be there. I'll be with you all the time. You'll be okay. I give you my word. Listen to me. I will take care of you. You have my word. I will be there." Tash was silent. He sincerely believed that after so long, this man was his friend and wished him well. But this, having a Nadiv inside your head, inside the only part of him that was still clean, and that only because they didn't know how to force their way in, leaving it like every other part of him, soiled, damaged, corrupted. It was hard to imagine being brave enough to go through with that. "I don't see what I can do." Saam was frustrated. There had been a phone call and he needed to leave, hopefully not for more than a day or 2, but he needed to go today. What to do with Tash? He doesn't speak English yet. I can't just leave him here. I gave him my word I would take care of him. There's no one here who speaks Russian. He'll think I've abandoned him. He has to be with someone he can talk to, someone who will look after him, take responsibility for him. What do I do? Johnson looked at him levelly. Then, with some hesitation, "Doesn't Nadia speak Russian?" Nadia, a successful actress and a great beauty, had been a long-term companion of Saam's when he first went public. They were still good friends, though she had since married and given birth to an exquisite little girl. Saam looked up. Nadia, who lived less than an hour away, who was wealthy and resourceful, with a large staff and a larger home, who could cope with just about anything. Would that work? Could that work? Let me call her. "Saam!" Lily, 7 years old, heartbreakingly beautiful, launched herself into Saam's arms, requiring him to catch her mid-air, as she always did. It was a small price to pay to hear his name said correctly by the little human. She cuddled almost fiercely into his neck, babbling in a mixture of English and Russian. "Where have you been? Do you know how long you've been gone?" Saam, never entirely immune to the desire to show off a little, answered her in his still hesitating Russian. "Yes, but I missed you every day." He allowed her to carry on cuddling and squeezing him, while Nadia, currently sporting an enormous mane of fiery red hair, long and thick and curly, said softly, "Since when do you speak Russian?" Saam looked away, nuzzled Lily's neck, and blew little puffs of air, which made her squeal and giggle. "I like your hair," he said, possibly insincerely, looking sideways at Nadia. Exasperated, she threw an angry glance at Johnson. "Why does it always have to be him? Aren't you supposed to be looking out for him?" Johnson, who knew full well what she was talking about, looked a little shamefaced. He wasn't entirely happy about what Saam routinely put himself through. Saam laughed out loud for Lily's benefit and said, "Lily, would you like to meet my new friend, Tash?" He put her on the ground, turned her to face the Xonak. Suddenly extravagantly shy, she backed against his legs. Saam stage whispered, "He speaks Russian, like you." The little girl gazed up at a dark young man dressed in an assortment of ill-fitting clothes, painfully thin, badly bruised, with scared, confused eyes. Beautiful violet amethyst eyes. Lily had been around ETs her whole life. She was also a tremendous judge of character. This guy was nothing to be scared of. She gave him her 100-megawatt smile and said in Russian, "Your hair is terrible. Who did that? They should be ashamed." She was putting her hand out to him, and a couple of the adults stiffened. But she put her hand gently on his wrist and said, "You must be hungry. The kitchen is this way. Would you like coffee, or tea, or something stronger?" Tash was pulled into the kitchen before he had time to demur. Nadia put her arms around Saam in empathy and friendship and remembrance of old passion and love. Saam closed his eyes and nuzzled, let himself smell her hair. His whole body said, "I miss you." He jerked his head back a little, puzzled. "Is that real hair?" "Yes, it's real, just not really mine." Saam made a slight gagging gesture, and she thumped his shoulder. He left his arm around her waist as long as he could. "Don't let her paint his face, okay?" Nadia snorted. "She's not 5 anymore." Then more seriously, "He seems very new. Is he going to be okay? I mean—" Saam knew exactly what she meant. He had taken the time to look Tash quietly in the eye and say, "These people are my friends. I love them. They are good people. If they say or do anything to hurt or offend you, it will be by accident. Please, don't do anything to harm them, okay?" Now he said, "He'll be fine. I don't think there's any anger in him. Not yet. And I have his word. And Lily likes him, and she's never wrong." He didn't say that Tash knew that the consequences of hurting these people would be terrible. Apart from anything else, he would lose the one friend he had in the entire world, in this whole unfriendly, unsympathetic world. There was a quick interchange between them about whether Johnson would stay here with them or go with Saam to wherever the hell he was going. The Secret Service agent and Nadia, both aware of just how tired and sad Saam was looking, ganged up on him. Johnson would go with him, and he would appoint someone else, someone he trusted, to hang around the penthouse for a couple of days, enjoying the best coffee and biscuits he would ever taste. Forget the White House. This was where the best snacks in the capital were to be found. Johnson had already made up his mind about that earlier this morning, when he laughed and commented to the grey-faced cherub, "You okay? You look like you've been rode hard and put away wet." It was something his father, who kept horses his whole life, routinely said to him when he was a teenager. "What did you say?" Saam's whisper was ice cold, and his face bore an expression that Johnson had never before seen turned on him personally. It was easy to forget that he had been a fighter, since so much of his time was spent caring for damaged people, being consciously gentle and supportive. Now Johnson saw for a fleeting moment a man who could probably break his neck with very little effort. He fought the urge to back off, crouched his 6'4" frame so that he was looking into Saam's eyes. He saw the awkward way the cherub was sitting, and realized something that should have been obvious to him at once. "I'm sorry. I just meant you didn't look well. Can I get you anything?" Saam's face softened, and went on softening. Then the heavy eyelashes began to flutter a little. Johnson was horrified as, just for the briefest moment, he thought the other man might cry. Then Saam drew in a huge breath and said, "Coffee." And the moment passed. When they took their farewells, leaving Nadia to feed and entertain Lily's new best friend, Saam had cuddled her one last time, hard, in a way he wouldn't normally do, and definitely not in front of anyone else. They had parted because she had wanted children, and Saam would not agree to father half-breeds. Nothing she could say would make him change his mind. She had called him stubborn, and he had agreed that she was right. She reminded him that they loved each other, and he agreed she was right. She pointed out that their children would be beautiful, and he agreed she was right. She shouted at him, first in English and then in Russian, when she could no longer express just how angry and sad and frustrated and heartbroken all this made her. And, not even knowing what she was saying, sadly, he sincerely agreed that she was almost certainly right. So they had moved on. She had married, had a beautiful child, and got divorced, leaving her with one delightful daughter, and occasionally a rather grumpy older stepchild, a boy, of whom Saam had heard stories, but whom he had never met. Through all of which he had been treated like a welcome and celebrated friend. Even her ex liked him, despite the fact that he so obviously still loved her. But he didn't normally let it show, not this much. To Saam she said teasingly, "It's a pity you didn't know Russian while we were together. It could have been useful." Saam laughed a little at that, and said softly and rather sadly, "You're probably right." A familiar sentence that made her heart ache. To Johnson she said nothing, just nodded, and with her eyes told him silently and fiercely, "Do your job. Take care of him." It took less than 15 minutes to have a man on the door. Saam was taking his leave of Tash, reassuring him that all would be well, that he would be back in a couple of days, and that these people would take care of him, and letting Lily know that she was still the most beautiful little girl he had ever seen on any planet, and letting her kiss him goodbye. The noise outside was sudden, alarming, a loud voice, aggressive, arguing with the Secret Service guys. Saam's hand went to his hip, a long, useless gesture since he was not allowed to wear a light weapon. Damn it. He smiled. Stay here. Quiet, calm, reassuring. Then he went into the living room, ready to do murder. He saw a young man, a teenager in scruffy black clothes, with dyed black hair, pale skin, badly done eye makeup, multiple earrings, and an aggrieved look on his face. He looked at Saam, and his expression moved from shocked surprise to disgust. "Well, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had your boyfriend here." Nadia, parental, said, "Why aren't you at school? Is everything okay?" "Nicky!" Lily was squealing again, running to her half-brother in delight. "Were you a bad boy? Did they throw you out? Saam's here. Come and meet my new friend." With the fingers of one hand, Saam surreptitiously slid his knife back into his sleeve. Nicky, out of the corner of one eye, watched him do it. Well, to be fair, that was pretty cool. Johnson looked around at the emotional chaos, clearly not knowing what to do next. They had to go. They had to go now. Nadia said, "I've got this. There's nothing here I can't handle. Go. Just go." So they did.